Around midnight on May 1st, 2025, or possibly early morning on May 2nd, Malehya Brooks-Murray woke up in the home she shared with her boyfriend Daniel Martell and her 3 children. According to statements she made to family members in the days and weeks following the disappearance of her 2 oldest children, 6-year-old Lily and 4-year-old Jack, Malehya discovered Daniel in the bathroom. What she says she witnessed during those hours would become a crucial piece of information in understanding the timeline and circumstances surrounding the children's disappearance. Multiple family members have confirmed that Malehya told them Daniel was using methamphetamine in the bathroom that night. The exact time varies depending on the source. Some family members recall Malehya saying it was around midnight. Others remember her saying it was closer to 4 in the morning. But regardless of the specific hour, the allegation remains consistent. Daniel Martell was allegedly using drugs during the critical hours before Lily and Jack were reported missing at approximately 10 a.m. on May 2nd. RCMP, which has conducted 86 formal interviews as part of their investigation, has spoken with the family members to whom Malehya made these statements. Staff Sergeant Rob McCamon, head of major crimes for Nova Scotia RCMP, has stated publicly that investigators are forming pictures of what may have taken place, and that they are considering the impact of long-term justice, which is investigator language for criminal prosecution. The question of what Daniel was doing in the hours before the children disappeared is central to understanding what happened that night. This is why RCMP is investigating claims about drug use and why those hours matter to the case against Daniel Martell. May 2nd, 2025, Lansdowne Station, Nova Scotia, a small rural community in Pictou County. The home at the center of this case is a modest property where Daniel Martell lived with his girlfriend, Malehya Brooks-Murray, her 2 children from a previous relationship, Lily age 6 and Jack age 4, and their infant daughter Meadow. Daniel's mother, Janie McKenzie, also lived on the property in a camper trailer. According to the timeline provided by Daniel and Malehya to police, they went to bed late on the evening of May 1st. They claim they woke up around 10 in the morning on May 2nd and noticed they didn't hear the children. After searching the house and property, Malehya called 911 at approximately 10:01 a.m. to report that Lily and Jack were missing. She told the dispatcher that the children must have put on their boots, opened the sliding glass door, left through the backyard gate, and wandered into the woods. RCMP arrived within 22 minutes and began what would become one of the largest search operations in Nova Scotia history, over 12,000 hours of searching. 40 kilometers of terrain covered by ground teams, cadaver dogs, and helicopters. No trace of Lily and Jack has been found, and as the months have passed, the investigation has shifted focus from a missing persons case to what Staff Sergeant McCamon describes as a major crime investigation that requires a methodical approach and consideration of long-term justice. Before we examine the specific allegations about drug use and why they matter to RCMP's investigation, you need to subscribe to Unsolved Archive immediately. We don't just report headlines. We analyze the evidence, the timelines, the statements, and the investigative techniques that separate truth from deception. If you want in-depth coverage of cases where every detail matters, where investigators are building comprehensive cases for prosecution, hit subscribe and turn on notifications now. Smash that like button because this case deserves scrutiny. 2 children have been missing for 8 months. Their stepfather's behavior during the hours before they disappeared is under investigation. Comment below with your thoughts. Do you believe drug use played a role in what happened to Lily and Jack? Let's examine why RCMP is investigating these claims and what they reveal about the timeline of that night. The first source of information about Daniel's alleged drug use that night comes from Malehya herself. Haley, Malehya's stepsister, has stated publicly that Malehya told her about the bathroom incident. According to Haley, Malehya said that she woke up during the night, either around midnight or in the early morning hours, and found Daniel in the bathroom using methamphetamine. Haley's account is supported by Belinda, a family friend who is close to Malehya's grandmother. Belinda has confirmed that Malehya told another family member, Lana, essentially the same story. Lana then relayed that information to Belinda. While the exact time varies slightly between accounts, with some saying midnight and others saying around 4 a.m., the core allegation remains consistent. Daniel was allegedly using drugs during the critical hours before the children were reported missing. When Haley questioned Malehya about this, asking why she didn't check on the children when she got up and discovered Daniel in the bathroom, Malehya reportedly said it was dark and she just went back to bed. That response struck Haley as strange. If you wake up in the middle of the night and discover your partner using drugs in the bathroom, wouldn't you check on your children? Wouldn't you want to make sure they're safe? The fact that Malehya allegedly went back to sleep without checking on Lily and Jack has raised questions among family members, and based on the scope of RCMP's investigation, likely among investigators as well. Daniel Martell's own statements about drug use have evolved significantly over the course of the investigation. In early interviews, Daniel presented himself as someone who had struggled with addiction in the past but was no longer using. He told interviewers that he attended Narcotics Anonymous meetings 3 times a week, and that while he knew people who had serious drug problems, he was not among them. He positioned himself as someone who could control his use, who could put it down when needed. But as the investigation progressed and more information became public, Daniel's story changed. In an interview with the Drunk Turkey Show, when pressed by the host about his drug history, Daniel admitted that yes, he had used drugs, but he insisted it was before Lily and Jack went missing. He tried to separate his drug use from the timeline of the disappearance. However, the Globe and Mail newspaper reported on troubling issues inside the home, including Daniel's admission of drug abuse to RCMP investigators. Additionally, photographs from Daniel's social media account show him years ago with a friend who is holding what appears to be a syringe. Daniel's attempt to minimize his drug use and distance it from the relevant time frame is a classic pattern in cases where substance abuse is a factor. Suspects often admit to past use while denying current use, or admit to current use while insisting it didn't affect the events in question. The evolution of Daniel's story from denial to qualified admission mirrors what family members say Malehya told them about finding him using drugs that specific night. Why does drug use matter to an investigation into missing children? From a law enforcement perspective, substance use is relevant for several reasons. First, it affects judgment and impulse control. Methamphetamine in particular is known to cause paranoia, aggression, sleep deprivation, and impaired decision-making. A person under the influence of methamphetamine may react violently to minor provocations. They may make choices they wouldn't make while sober. They may harm someone and then attempt to cover it up in ways that seem logical to their drug-affected thinking but are actually deeply flawed. Second, drug use establishes state of mind. If Daniel was using methamphetamine during the hours before the children disappeared, it means he was in an altered mental state when whatever happened to Lily and Jack occurred. That altered state is relevant to understanding his actions, his decisions, and his behavior. Third, drug use often involves periods of being awake when others are asleep. If Daniel was using methamphetamine, he may have been awake during hours when Malehya and the children were sleeping. That creates opportunity. It creates a time frame where he was alone with the children while in an altered state. Fourth, drug use requires money. The Globe and Mail has reported that the household was under severe financial stress. They were deeply in debt and struggling to support 3 children. If Daniel was spending money on drugs, that financial pressure would have been even more intense. Financial stress combined with substance abuse is a recognized risk factor in cases of family violence. Let's examine the timeline more carefully and consider what the drug use allegations mean for understanding what happened. According to Daniel and Malehya's account to police, they went to bed late on the evening of May 1st. They claim they slept through the night and woke up around 10 a.m. on May 2nd. But if Malehya's statements to family members are accurate, that account is false. If Malehya woke up at midnight or at 4 a.m. and found Daniel in the bathroom using drugs, then they were not both sleeping peacefully through the night. Someone was awake. Someone was active in the home. And if Daniel was using methamphetamine, an upper that keeps users awake for extended periods, then he may have been awake for most or all of the night. This is where the timeline becomes critical. The last independent sighting of Lily and Jack alive was on May 1st at approximately 3 p.m. when they were seen at a dollar store with Malehya. From that point forward, only Daniel and Malehya can account for the children's whereabouts. If Daniel was awake through the night, using drugs, while Malehya and the children slept, then there are hours during which he was alone with the children, and no one can verify what occurred. Multiple neighbors have reported hearing a loud vehicle, consistent with Malehya's Nissan Pathfinder that Daniel drove, coming and going from the property between approximately 12:30 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. If Daniel was awake and active during those hours, if he was driving somewhere in the middle of the night, the question becomes where was he going and why? The effects of methamphetamine on behavior are well documented and relevant to understanding why RCMP is investigating these allegations so thoroughly. Methamphetamine is a powerful central nervous system stimulant that produces euphoria, increased energy, and heightened alertness. But it also causes significant negative effects. Users often experience paranoia, believing that others are out to get them or that they're being watched. They may become aggressive and violent, lashing out at perceived threats. Their judgment is severely impaired. They make decisions that seem logical in the moment, but are actually irrational and dangerous. Sleep deprivation is another major factor. Methamphetamine users often stay awake for days at a time. This prolonged wakefulness leads to hallucinations, psychosis, and extreme irritability. A person who has been awake all night using methamphetamine is not thinking clearly. They're not making rational decisions. And if something goes wrong, if a child misbehaves or won't stop crying or gets hurt accidentally, the drug-affected person may respond in ways they never would while sober. They may panic. They may overreact violently. And then, in the aftermath, they may attempt to cover up what happened rather than seek help. The presence of methamphetamine in someone's system doesn't mean they're automatically guilty of a crime. But in cases involving missing or deceased children, drug use by a caretaker during the relevant time frame is always investigated thoroughly because of how significantly it affects behavior and judgment. RCMP's investigation into the drug use allegations has been multifaceted. According to Staff Sergeant Rob McCamon, investigators have conducted 86 formal interviews. These are structured, recorded conversations where investigators obtain first-hand knowledge from witnesses. Among those interviewed were family members to whom Malehya made statements about Daniel's drug use. RCMP has also interviewed Daniel himself multiple times, testing the consistency of his accounts and looking for contradictions. In cases where substance abuse is suspected, investigators look for several types of evidence. They examine financial records to see if there are unexplained cash withdrawals or transactions consistent with drug purchases. They interview known associates, including dealers or other users. They look at phone records and text messages for communications about obtaining drugs. They may execute search warrants looking for drug paraphernalia or residue. And they analyze the suspect's statements over time, noting how the story changes as pressure increases. In Daniel's case, investigators have documented that he initially denied drug use, then admitted to past use, then acknowledged use closer to the relevant time frame. That progression suggests someone who is being forced by evidence and witness statements to admit incrementally what he initially hoped to conceal. The fact that RCMP continues to investigate this case intensively, despite Daniel and Malehya both having passed polygraph tests, indicates that investigators believe substance abuse and other evidence outweighs those test results. One particularly concerning detail that has emerged involves Daniel's drug dealer. According to family sources, a man named Chancel, who Malehya identified as Daniel's drug supplier, was present at the property on the day of the search. This individual, whose name appears in court documents related to the case, was allegedly helping Daniel search for the children. The presence of a drug dealer at a crime scene on the day children are reported missing is highly unusual and raises obvious questions. Why would Daniel call his dealer to help search? What was their relationship? Had Daniel obtained drugs from this person recently, perhaps even on the night of May 1st or early morning of May 2nd? RCMP has interviewed this individual as part of their investigation. The connection between Daniel's alleged drug use, his dealer's presence at the scene, and the timeline of the disappearance is something investigators are examining closely. In addition, neighbors reported hearing a loud vehicle coming and going during the overnight hours. If Daniel was driving to meet his dealer or to obtain drugs, that would explain the vehicle activity. And if Daniel was out driving during those hours, the question becomes, was he alone, or were there other passengers in the vehicle? These are the types of questions RCMP is working to answer. The response from Daniel's family has been defensive and dismissive of the drug use allegations. Daniel's mother, Janie McKenzie, has declined to address questions about her son's substance abuse history. When asked about specific claims, she has either refused to comment or suggested that people should mind their own business. This defensive posture is understandable from a mother's perspective. No parent wants to believe their child is capable of harming others, especially children. But it also suggests an unwillingness to confront uncomfortable truths. If Daniel was using drugs that night, if his behavior was erratic or dangerous, family members who were on the property might have noticed. Janie lived in a camper on the same property. Her dog reportedly barks at everything according to police dispatch audio. If Daniel was coming and going during the night, if there was unusual activity, Janie may have information that could help investigators. Her refusal to engage with questions about Daniel's behavior that night has frustrated both investigators and the public following the case. Meanwhile, Malehya's behavior in the month since the children disappeared has also raised concerns. According to her stepsister Haley, Malehya has been living with relatives, drinking heavily, and presenting herself as if nothing is wrong. She dresses up, wears makeup, and goes out. Behavior that family members describe as inconsistent with that of a grieving mother whose children are missing. Malehya has also reportedly told people that Daniel was using drugs, but then later denied saying it, creating confusion about what she actually knows and when she knew it. Staff Sergeant Rob McCamon has been careful in his public statements not to reveal specific investigative details, but his language provides important clues about the direction of the case. McCamon has said that investigators are forming pictures of what may have taken place. That phrase, forming pictures, suggests that investigators are assembling pieces of information into a coherent narrative. They're building a timeline. They're understanding the sequence of events. And drug use during the critical hours is a significant piece of that picture. McCamon has also stated that investigators must consider the impact of long-term justice. In law enforcement terminology, long-term justice refers to the ultimate goal of securing a conviction that will withstand appeals and result in accountability. It means building a case so thoroughly, so methodically, that when charges are eventually filed, the prosecution has everything needed to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The fact that McCamon uses this phrase indicates RCMP believes they know what happened and are working toward charging someone. The drug use allegations fit into that larger case. They help explain behavior. They help explain timeline. They help explain state of mind. And they help establish that Daniel's account of sleeping peacefully through the night is false. For the families of Lily and Jack Sullivan, the revelations about drug use are both heartbreaking and infuriating. These were two small children living in a home where their primary caretaker was allegedly using methamphetamine. Teachers had documented multiple black eyes on both children. A Child Protective Services social worker had visited the home weeks before the disappearance, investigating suspected abuse or neglect. The children were living in an environment that multiple warning signs indicated was dangerous, and yet they remained in that home until they disappeared. The role of methamphetamine in this tragedy, if the allegations are accurate, represents a failure to protect vulnerable children from a foreseeable risk. It represents a situation where drug abuse and its effects on judgment and behavior may have led directly to harm. Families who have lost children to violence perpetrated by someone under the influence of drugs often speak about the frustration of knowing that had the substance abuse been addressed, had intervention occurred earlier, their loved one might still be alive. In this case, if Daniel was using methamphetamine on the night Lily and Jack disappeared, and if that drug use contributed to whatever happened to them, then there were multiple opportunities for intervention that were missed. The system failed, and two children paid the price. As of January 2026, no charges have been filed in connection with the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan. Daniel Martell and Malehya Brooks-Murray both maintained that they had nothing to do with the children going missing, and that they believe the children wandered off the property. Both have stated publicly that they passed polygraph tests administered by RCMP, though the specific questions asked have not been disclosed. However, polygraph tests are not admissible as evidence in Canadian courts precisely because they are not considered reliable enough. RCMP's continued intensive investigation, despite the polygraph results, indicates that other evidence carries more weight. The allegations of drug use, supported by statements from multiple family members who say Malehya told them what she witnessed, represent one piece of a much larger evidentiary puzzle. RCMP has obtained search warrants, reviewed thousands of hours of surveillance footage, interviewed more than 80 people, and deployed 11 different specialized units to this investigation. Staff Sergeant McCamon has called this the greatest volume of information he has encountered in his 25-year career. All of that effort, all of that scrutiny is aimed at one goal: determining what happened to Lily and Jack Sullivan on May 2, 2025, and holding whoever is responsible accountable. The investigation continues. RCMP has stated publicly that they will not stop until they have answers. For Daniel Martell, the allegations about drug use that night are just one of many problems with his account. He has given contradictory statements about who woke up first, about whether he and Malehya searched together or separately, about how long he was outside checking the cabins, and about what time police arrived. Each contradiction is documented, each inconsistency is noted, and when combined with the drug use allegations, a picture emerges of someone whose behavior during the critical hours was not what he has claimed. For Malehya Brooks-Murray, the question is what she knew and when she knew it. If she truly witnessed Daniel using drugs that night, if she woke up multiple times and found him in the bathroom or saw him behaving erratically, then her claim that she slept peacefully and only woke at 10 a.m. is false. And if she lied about that, what else has she lied about? These are the questions RCMP is working to answer. And when they have completed their methodical, comprehensive investigation, when they have built the case for long-term justice that Staff Sergeant McCamon references, charges will be filed. Until then, the public can only watch, wait, and hope that two small children who deserve justice will finally receive it. If you want continued coverage of the Lily and Jack Sullivan case as RCMP moves toward the conclusion that investigators have indicated is coming, subscribe to Unsolved Archive now. Like this video to help others find this information. Share it so that Lily and Jack's story remains in the public consciousness, and pressure remains on investigators to complete their work. Comment below with your thoughts. Do you believe the allegations about drug use that night? Do you think it explains Daniel's behavior and the inconsistencies in his statements? The investigation continues. The evidence accumulates, and eventually, the truth about what happened during those critical hours will be revealed. For two children who deserved safety and protection, for a family that has lost them, and for a community that has searched tirelessly for answers, that truth cannot come soon enough.